Welcome to the Financial Flossing Podcast with Ross Brannon, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. Ross Brannon is a financial advisor who knows it's not just about your teeth. He helps dental practice owners protect and maximize today's cash flow to plan for tomorrow's cash needs. Find him at rossbrannon.com. On the show, he brings together experts to help dental professionals looking to make smart money decisions to grow their income, turn their retirement goals into reality, and improve their lives. And now, here's your host, Ross Brannon.
Welcome to the show. My guests today are Pasha, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his last name, and Ben Reyhani. These guys are aesthetic dentists in Los Angeles, and they work at Apoesthetics, a premier aesthetics dental studio. But that's not the whole story. It's a long story. We're going to talk about it. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Pasha, how do you pronounce your last name?
Hakimzadeh.
Yeah, would have never got that in a million years. Never got that in a million years. So you guys are a part of the Apoesthetics LA office. And could tell me a little bit about Apoesthetics, and then we're going to kind of dive into your entire world.
We're going to let Ben kick this off for us.
Well, Apoesthetic is actually an offshoot of Dr. Michael Appa's office in New York. He is a very well-known aesthetic dentist. He's super talented guy. He also has an office in Dubai. And us growing up, we had always admired what he and Dr. Rosenthal were doing. So at one point, we also had a cosmetic dental office, and we realized that we really appreciated what he had grown. And we met him in New York a few years back and told him that if he was ever interested in opening something in LA, we would be interested in joining him. And a couple of years later, he reached out, and the rest is history. And we built something that we think is pretty special, in which we're solely focused on cosmetic dentistry. And we have a full in-house lab with super talented ceramists, where we're able to control all the aspects of what we do. And overall, we've been open for 2.5 years. We couldn't be happier.
Now, that office is in Beverly Hills, correct?
Yeah.
But then you have 9 other practices in the greater Los Angeles area, correct?
That's right. Very different business models.
And that is a more general dentistry, correct?
That's it.
Absolutely.
Bread and butter dentistry. Okay.
So you have 2 different models here going after 2 different clientele. So that's really, I think, brilliant for you guys now. But let's rewind for a second and tell everyone a little bit about your background, because it's very unique. Where are you from? Where were you born? Where have you lived?
Pasha, go ahead.
I'll start with me. I was born in the United States, but had moved back to Iran and pretty much spent my middle school, some high school in Iran, and I moved back to the States. Ben was born in Iran, but moved here at an early age. And I think the most interesting part about this is we met the first day of dental school during lunch, and we became friends. And here we are 12 years later, 10 locations. I guess let's call it a DSO management company, and more to come.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. And of course, we could probably spend an hour talking about that. And, your view of dentistry, your perspective on the world, everything is probably so much more rounded than someone like me who's lived in the U.S. my entire life. Talk a little bit about the dynamic you have between 9 general dentistry practices, 1 high-end aesthetic practice, and how that whole situation works.
Well, when you have one practice, it's much easier to control every aspect of what's happening in that practice. It's you know about every single patient coming and going, you know exactly how every interaction goes, and you're able to control everything. I'm not saying that doesn't have its own problems, it does, but then when you have 9 practices, you have to be a little bit more tolerant of inefficiencies. But at the same time, you have to have better systems in place, a lot of great systems in place. And we're lucky enough where we have Pasha's brother, who started with us 12 years ago now. when we opened up our first practice, which was like a little 3-op office in Bell Gardens, which is not a very high-end place. And it was the three of us. Me and Pasha were working 7 days a week in different locations. And he was managing that practice without any dental experience at all. He was 20 years old at the time. And over the last 10 years, he's built his repertoire in which once we opened up the Apoesthetic, we kind of just gave the reins to him in a way that like he became the CEO, in which he makes most of the decisions. He consults with us, but he's running it. And without him, at the end of the day, it's the people, right? And without him, we couldn't have done any of this.
Well, I was talking offline beforehand how in my experience working with dentists, you really have two different dentists. You have the dentist who owns a job, which is fine, but you do have a ceiling in your income when you do that, versus the business owner who happens to be a dentist. With 10 practices, obviously you fall in the business owner category, and you've done a great job delegating where you have 9 general dentistry practices or locations, and you have a CEO who heads it all up. Now, so you spend most of your time practicing in the aesthetic office, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, for our listeners who may not know, who might be new to dentistry or in dental school and not that well versed, explain in layman's terms what aesthetic dentistry is versus other types of dentistry.
I think, there's this terminology is at the end of the day, aesthetic dentistry to me means comprehensive dentistry with an element of art and beauty into it. So our clients are coming in not because they're looking for a dentist or they have a cavity. They're unhappy with their smile. They're unhappy with the shape of their teeth. And we use function as our base, but we kind of design everything around aesthetics. So does this look good on you? Color, shape, orientation. So we're able to, with technology, scanning, porcelain veneers, handmade, control a lot of these little details that creates a beautiful smile for someone that is looking for one. So it's a very intimate relationship, one-on-one. Patients typically know what they want and they're looking for some sort of enhancement. So we need to make sure we understand what that means. And then we have this great team around us that allows us to kind of get a little bit more creative. And, like I said, our ceramist, our in-house lab really dictates what we could deliver for our patients, which is natural, undetectable, but still beautiful smiles.
And it really
that's kind of what we decide.
And it really couldn't be any more different than general dentistry. You are incredibly high-end, low volume, long procedures versus, cavities and cleanings, and probably more profitable, obviously, as well, but two different business models, but they're both fantastic. They complement each other very, very well. So let's talk about business here. You are business owners who happen to be dentists, and I think you recognize that, but that's how I like to describe it. I like to say that cash flow is king. I say it all the time, cash flow is king. They don't teach you that in dental school. There's a lot of things they don't teach you about business in dental school. And I've come across a lot of dentists who want to sell just because they hate managing people. And it's really unfortunate when you hear that. Talk a little bit about, as dentists who own 10 locations rather, talk about the importance of cash flow from your perspective. I'm sure there have been days where it was a little tight.
Oh man, we deal with that even now, right? Because like you said, cash flow is something that as bigger you are, there are more bills to pay. There are more people to take care of within your own team. There's more vendors. So we are very fortunate that we have people on our team who allows us to, if you heard the term revenue cycle management, in the beginning, it's just like, okay, well, I'm billing and I'm collecting, but every bucket is important, and the timing of that rotation is super important when it comes to cash flow. So we got to make sure that we're always looking ahead and understanding what's coming in and what's supposed to go out and scheduling all this. And, so we don't just kind of get bottlenecked right in the beginning of the month. So we work behind the scene a lot with a lot of our vendors and people to make sure we could manage this cash flow situation.
Now, is cash flow uniquely different in the aesthetics location versus the general dentistry location and how you manage it? being that one's volume and one's not, if you will?
Yeah, one is on our, let's call it group practice DSO part. We are still relying on insurance. They have their own revenue cycle management, so God knows when we'll get paid. And there's just different ways of income coming into the practice and how it's going out. On the aesthetic side, there are larger sums that comes into your account, but the cost of running a high-end practice it's not traditional. You can't find any consultant that comes in like, well, you need to keep it under 30%. You need someone, and that ceramist is, great at what they do, you pay them more than the average. Or the rent that we pay in Beverly Hills it's just night and day with the rent that we pay in Bell Gardens. So everything kind of is different, and the technology that we invest in our cosmetic office and the loan that we have. So it's definitely two different, apples and oranges.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So you guys were doing aesthetic dentistry in your 9 locations for a while, though, right?
Absolutely. And we also had a practice not as fancy as our Apoesthetic location, but prior to that, we owned this location that was almost the same business model. It was a cosmetically driven practice, but within that practice, we were doing general dentistry, and we were still accepting some insurances, et cetera. So we were familiar with the model, and we knew what it meant and what kind of dedication and, what logistic behind. But once we actually joined Dr. Apa and his organization, it's a different ball game and different ways of looking at the business, let's call it.
So what would you say to a dentist who maybe they're getting bored of the basic procedures and they really like to get into the more aesthetic stuff like you're talking about, just because it interests them more, but obviously it's a revenue opportunity? What would you caution them with, and what would you encourage them with?
Dr. Ben is our clinical leader, so I'll let him kind of start with that.
In aesthetic dentistry?
So what advice or wisdom would you give to a dentist who would like to expand more into aesthetic dentistry because they're either intrigued by it or they want the revenue from it, and versus just the traditional, crowns and cleanings and cavities and et cetera?
Well, when you were discussing what's the difference between running an aesthetic office and running a general practice, if we were to run a general practice, for example, we were to buy a practice today, we know exactly what the next year is going to look like, because we know exactly what model marketing we're going to do. We know exactly what kind of material we're going to put in there. We know that the kind of experienced dentist we can put in, the manager, everything, all the training and everything like that. When it comes to aesthetic dentistry, the difference with that is that you have to build a reputation. You can't just come out and just market yourself into it and be able to see the kind of growth that you expect to be able to see in a predictable way with the other practices. And if I have to advise people on, especially we have a lot of younger dentists that come to us and they want to be aesthetic dentists and all that stuff. And what I tell them first is I'm like, you have to know how to be a good dentist. You have to be a good general dentist to become a good aesthetic dentist, because otherwise, if you have no idea what you're doing as far as general dentistry, then everything you do is going to fail and your reputation is going to go down the drain within a year. So, and as an aesthetic dentist, your reputation is everything. So that's the first thing. And then when it comes to being a good aesthetic dentist, I think you just have to do a lot of it. Just like everything else, your first few cases are probably going to be terrible. But if you have a good team, you have to use a great lab. You can't use a bad lab and, cheap out on your materials and the lab and everything and think that you're going to get great outcomes out of it, and be like, oh, I'll figure it out later. You have to have a good team around you. Take a lot of courses, take a lot of photography courses, find a mentor, which is really important for us. I think the way we've been able to grow, just being around Dr. Apa and his team, we've been out for a while. We're not exactly newbies here, but, being around people that do it on a day in and day out basis, we've been able to grow exponentially the last couple of years. So if there's any advice, is that just make sure that you're not, if you're going the aesthetic way, you can't half-ass it. You have to go all the way and you'll succeed. If you think that you're going to be able to become a part-time aesthetic dentist, then it's going to be really tough for you to be able to establish yourself.
So that's a good point. So just to clarify, so if I'm running a general practice, you don't recommend just adding aesthetics to my general practice. You got to go in all in aesthetics, basically, is what you're saying.
Well, I think you can. I think most general dentists probably do work in the aesthetic area as well. But, what I feel like is like you can't be really good at something you do sometimes, right? So it's if that's your goal, is to become known as an aesthetic dentist, you have to go all in. But if your goal is to do, aesthetic dentistry sometimes and just be a practitioner, just a general practitioner that does aesthetic dentistry sometimes, then that's okay. But you're never going to be known. That's why we get a lot of people coming to us who are like, oh, well, I just got all my cavities fixed. Now I'm here to fix my aesthetics. And that happens all the time where, they see their general dentist and then they come to us, we fix their teeth, and then they probably go back to a pissed off general dentist that goes, oh, I could have done that for you, when they couldn't.
Well, let's kind of pivot back to the general side. Talk about your growth from your first practice of 1 to 9. What was that process like? Was this intentional? Was this kind of like accidental? Did it fall in your lap? Or did you start out as associates somewhere? And did you guys always have a vision of building this out to however big it is now?
We always had the vision of building it out. I think I'll let you continue after this. I'll tell the story of how we started the whole thing. Is we both worked we were both associates at big corporations. And one day I was just super frustrated. I was working my butt off. And at the end of the day, I was looking at my paycheck and I'm like, this does not equate to, the kind of effort I'm putting in. And so I couldn't control any aspect of what I was doing. All of the people they hired were terrible. And I told Pasha. And so I had dinner with him and I'm like, listen, I can't really afford to open a practice on my own. I knew at the time he was in the same boat as I was. And I was like, let's open something together and then let's start growing it. And then Pasha was, obviously, he actually got partnership offers at a big corporation and he turned it down and we ended up partnering up. Pasha?
Yeah. I mean, to look back, it's crazy what we did and how we did it. First of all, we were out of school right around recession. So 2007, 8. So times were tough. I think Ben mentioned not having mentors. You come out of dental school and you think you got it all figured out. And okay, now I'm a dentist. I know it all. Or I like aesthetics, but I don't have any idea how to do it. So we both had to kind of move out of LA a little bit, driving wise. Like he was practicing hour and a half. What is that? Southeast. I was practicing hour and a half northwest, and we were working for these bigger corporations. So our mentors in reality were corporation style dentistry, and not that they're doing bad work. Is, as Ben mentioned, we start losing our identity and we were just kind of going to work as you mentioned and just getting a paycheck. And so when the time came and neither one of us were motivated enough to continue that path, we decided to partner up and open our first practice. We had no idea how to run a dental practice. We had no idea how to get patients. There were so many days we kind of sat around and were like, what are we doing? Is this even, we just didn't know. But fast forward a couple of years and that office slowly picked up. We purchased an existing practice that has a lot of patients, but it was a totally different model, which now that you look back had pros and cons. And at the same time, we started doing a brand new build out in a very good location, which we believed would bring a lot of quality patients. So I think it took us 3 years just to kind of set these 3 locations up, and we were struggling and not making any money. And I think that's one thing that young dentists need to realize is, yes, times are a little bit different now with social media and et cetera, but you got to pay your dues. I mean, people look at us right now and like, oh my God, you guys are so, how do you do this? And how did you get so lucky? And you only work 2 days a week. Oh my God. Or, we work 7 days a week. We sacrificed, not traveled. We didn't have a whole lot of money, and my credit cards were maxed, and we did everything to survive, and here we are.
Yeah, so it's the overnight success, 15 years in the making.
Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
We've had a lot of drive homes where we're talking to each other, and it's not just in the beginning. I'm talking about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where we're still like, it's going to be all right. We're going to make it.
Now, would you recommend, if a dental school grad was saying, what should I do? Would you recommend corporate dentistry as the first place to go?
Absolutely.
I think
it gives you structure. It's, I think they have a lot better structure. They're able to feed you patients without having an emotional bond with them. I think like a lot of times when you go and work for private practices, the private practice, the doctor just wants to be involved in everything. And the corporate practices, they just look at things less emotionally, and you're able to probably grow a lot faster with those guys, at least in the beginning.
So what would you say, like, what's the best piece of advice you could give somebody who's maybe been practicing as an associate somewhere for a couple of years, really wants to start their own practice? What advice would you give them on starting their own practice?
Don't do it.
Well, I think any advice I have to give is really think hard about what it is you want to do. Spend some time, really research whatever it is you want to do, and then just dive in head first and don't look back. Because it's no matter what you decide to do, it's going to be freaking difficult. You're going to have a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of doubts, but it's just, there's a lot of different ways of making money. There's a lot of different ways of being happy, and your path doesn't have to be like everyone else.
Now, how did you make the transition, and when did you make the transition from working in your business, as in seeing patients was the number one thing you did, versus working on your business where you're managing more, running the business more?
I think as Ben mentioned earlier, having my brother as part of our management team is we were able to kind of split our responsibilities. So I kind of transitioned out of the chair a lot quicker than Ben. So Ben was more of our clinical driving production. He was placing more implants, and he started kind of developing our associates, and I kind of jumped on the back and worked with our team to make sure our systems are flawless and really drive, in the beginning, when you come out of dental school and you hear vision, mission, culture, you're just like, all right, man, whatever. Like, I got to make some money. But as you're growing, you start realizing that your vision, mission, culture is what drives your business and drive your people. So I was very big on that end and worked behind the scene with consultants and coaches to allow our team grow on the same page in one direction. So that kind of helped us transition. So Ben was still clinically involved and kind of knew what was going on the floor. And I was more involved in the patient experience and how we're bringing patients in and how we're taking care of them. Well, and I think that combination worked great.
A lot of people struggle with letting go, whether it's the emotional tie to patients like Ben was talking about earlier, but they struggle with letting go. But I mean, I know the answer to this, but I mean, you would not have been able to, you wouldn't have 10 locations right now if you guys weren't willing and able to step away and manage the business versus just being chairside, correct?
Yeah,
100%.
Exactly.
And was it hard?
Also, not as hard as you think. Being with patients could be a little bit taxing. I don't know. Sometimes you have to have a balance, I think. I think we both enjoy doing dentistry as long as it's the kind of dentistry we like. For example, doing aesthetics where we're actually creating something. But at the same time, we realize that if I tend to be in the offices most of the time, but I feel like every time I go in an office and I'm spending a whole day with an associate where I'm not doing dentistry, that means that for the next month, that associate is going to be a superstar, because whatever I taught them, all of a sudden, every day they go in, they're able to implement it. In which, if I had spent that one day performing dentistry, that would have just been it. There would have been no dividends being paid on that one day. So we're finding that, like you said, working on the practice as opposed to working in the practice ends up being a lot more fruitful for us.
And that's a good example of mentorship, whereas maybe you don't make as much money today by doing that, but you make a crap ton of money over the next 30 days or longer by doing that.
Which is, again, it's a lot of people don't see it that way. That's the problem, right? So when you hear a lot about people who have associates and all they do is they just keep picking from the associates, in which, I'm most of the time, I'm like, when I do a diagnosis, I'm like, give it to this guy, feed that person, because what that means is if I'm not prepping that crowd, I'm able to be in another office. I'm able to do more diagnosis. Yeah, it might not, I might have to give away a percentage, but at the end of the day, that's, we've always thought big, and we've thought big from the time we had 3 ops. We've always had the same kind of vision where even when we were struggling to pay the bills.
Well, it's an abundance mentality. You're trying to make sure your associates are empowered to do the most they can do. Obviously, they're going to earn more that way, versus if you hover over them and take cases from them, no one's going to make as much money as they could. But it's unfortunately human nature.
And your model won't work, right?
Right.
If we were, yes, we have friends of ours that are like, what do you mean? Like, your associates doing veneer cases? Why aren't you guys going? Isn't that more money for you guys? But yes, but then I'm taking away that excitement that the other associate has doing a cosmetic case. I'm more than willing to go into that practice, mentor them, and teach them what I see and how I do it, and hoping they'll do 3 more of these in the next 3 months. So yeah, it's a giver. There's giving and taking, but we're really trying to empower our team and our associates to
always having the long goal in mind. It's not thinking on the short term on anything.
Have that autonomy that you are the doctor, you are going to make the decision, and we are here to support and give you the support you need.
I think that's great. So as we wrap up here, if each of you, what's one piece of advice you would give to a new dental school grad, or even a practicing dentist who just wants to grow?
I think I was actually thinking about this, and I think the most important thing is invest in yourself and invest in your team. It's invest your time and your money on yourself and your team. That new shiny equipment, all it does is lose value over time. But once you invest in yourself and you invest in your team, be it your office manager, your associate, your assistant, every day that person gains in value. So if there's any advice, that's, all the equipment in the world can't replace what the education that you bring for yourself and for your team can do.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with, the reason I think we are successful is our goal is to be the most trusted advisor for our patients. So
wow, that's good.
We always, like, that's our business model. Like, if this is good for my mom, should be good for you as a patient. So that helps us with our quality check. And for people that are looking to grow, I think patients understand your intentions and how you are by entering your office. So work on your team, work on your vibe. Everything should be patient-centered, and the money will come. But if these younger associates are looking at every patient as dollars, then you become more, I don't know, it becomes more transactional, which you hate to hear patients like, oh, that my dentist, I didn't need this and they did this. You just have to change mindset when patients are entering your office, and when they feel like that you care, when they feel like you're listening to them and you're trying to help them, everything else is easy. So that's what I would recommend to all new dentists.
That's great. That's great advice. That's great wisdom. Guys, this has been a great episode, a great time hearing your story. We could probably go on for a lot longer. At least I could ask you questions for a lot longer. You may not want to answer them, but I could ask you questions forever. So it's been really a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having us. It was really fun, and we're looking forward to hearing it.
Well, guys, you've been listening to the Financial Flossing Podcast with Ross Brannon. We'll see you next week.
This has been another episode of Financial Flossing with Ross Brannon, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. For more on Ross Brannon, visit rossbrannon.com.
Registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, OSJ, 3664 Coolidge Court, Tallahassee, Florida, 32311, 850-562-9075. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS. Member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. North Florida Financial is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. California Insurance License Number 0L10073. Arkansas Insurance License Number 161-39032. 2021 119535. Expires 423. That last part can also say 2021 119535. Expiration April 2023.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by PAS, Guardian, or North Florida Financial, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. Ross is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, OSJ, 3664 Coolidge Court, Tallahassee, Florida, 32311, 850-562-9075. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC, financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. North Florida Financial is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. Arkansas Insurance License Number 161-39032. California Insurance License Number 0L10073. 2022 132656. Expiration 0224.